Where do you think most founders go wrong when they're building a company?
There's a handful of things. Maybe I might bunch it up into three broad categories. The first one is lack of ownership. The second one is the lack of letting go. And the third one is the lack of deliberate self-development and self-leadership. Your job is to drink coffee and have big thoughts as the founder, which is again that concept of take ownership of everything, think about strategy. So drink coffee is spending time with people, whether it's employees, coaching them, whether it's the market, whether it's prospective investors or acquirers. And have big thoughts is spend time on thinking strategy, coming up with new ideas, both for internal, things that you might share with partners and so on.
Welcome back to another episode of Growth Unlocked. I'm your host, Kieran Cron. Today's guest is Sidney Minassian, a serial entrepreneur who's built and exited multiple companies, including the AI analytics business GuT&x that was acquired by Versent in 2019. He previously led Sassian and now runs Impact Ladder, where he advises founders and execs on how to scale with clarity, conviction, and optionality. In this episode, we're going to unpack the founder's playbook, what it really takes to build, scale, and exit multiple companies without burning out. So, whether you're a first-time startup or managing a portfolio of ventures, I think this one's going to be packed full of insights that you can apply today. Sidney, thanks a lot for joining us.
Kieran, thanks for having me.
Awesome. Really looking forward to it. So, as I mentioned in the start, you've built and exited multiple companies, which is really impressive, and congratulations on that. What does your personal playbook look like for going about doing that, and where do most founders go wrong?
Thanks, Kieran. I should probably clarify. I've had one successful exit, multiple non-exits, which mean we've either rolled it into a new branding or pivoted. I've had one clean wipeout and shutdown, that's where a lot of battle scars come from. But then I've actually, through my coaching and advisory, helped multiple founders through multiple exits. So I've had, just to make sure the record's clear, I've had one clean exit myself, and the rest has been helping others through exits. So from a playbook perspective, there's a handful of things that come to mind that I actually applied for GuT&x, the successful exit that you mentioned. And of course, there's the regular stuff. Make sure you've got a good product, make sure the market needs it, make sure you're profitable. I don't want to really touch that, just to hopefully give the audience some fresh thinking or a little bit of a different perspective to activate the brain cells for all of us. The biggest thing I think that has worked for me, and it's in my playbook, brand is a very important aspect of how I go to market and how I position and how I work with various founders and companies right now. And that's both your personal brand and a company brand. And of course, content makes an important part of that. So I applaud you for what you're doing, both for your personal brand and for your business. And then I think there are two more important things that probably don't get mentioned that often, which is partnerships. And partnerships come in many forms, right? They come in the form of resellers and distributors, whatever. But depending on what you do, and so when we were at GuT&x, and I'm sure we'll dig in at some stage today in the chat, we were resellers of other people's products. So, and then we were ecosystem partners with some companies that we didn't really resell their products, but by creating a joint go-to-market effort, that created a lot of leverage for our brand. For example, Cisco and Telstra, and I'll talk about that when we talk about GuT&x. So partnerships is important. And finally, and this will come to no surprise for the people that know me, people and coaching of people. So one of the things that we underestimate often is like, it's all about the tech and, we've built something that's better, faster. It's very cool. And yes, we often hear that the product has to stand for itself. And, if the product's not magical, then you've already failed. I get all that. But there's so much to be said around how we bring people on the journey, how we coach them, and how we empower them to make some mistakes under our watch, right? And so happy to dig deeper on those, or, fold it into some of the other chats we'll have today as we talk about things. But I'd say that's the handful of things that sort of make up my playbook and the things that I try to guide founders and CEOs on that I work with today.
That's awesome. Yeah, I guess to kind of summarize it, it's really three components, which is brand, partnerships, and people. And I'm very passionate about the partnerships and also the people part. I mean, having spent 8 years at HubSpot, sort of 5.5 years building out their partner program in Australia, I'm a massive advocate for partnerships and can really see how that can, help businesses to scale into new regions and to sell warmer into different markets and kind of leverage that network effect. So massive proponent myself. But one piece I think which is sometimes maybe overlooked is the brand piece, right? And something that I've been thinking about a lot recently, because you mentioned before that it's not just the business, it's the personal brand, right? And I think that's the reality is like people want to connect with other people. You look at, these like highly successful businesses, consumers and customers usually associate and connect with often like the CEO or the founder or like the leader of the company more than they do necessarily the actual brand or the logo itself, right? So, I'd love to kind of hear from you in terms of, how you see businesses actually building a brand today, which, can be quite hard because there's a lot of noise out there. AI and Gen AI content is, everywhere now these days. How do you think that's potentially going to change in the future, if anything at all? Like the fundamentals of brand, do they differ? Do they change? I'd love to get your perspective on that.
Yeah, so obviously need to find things that go against the grain and the standard. So there's a little bit of creative thinking to do, and to be able to hold a position that is memorable, hopefully inspiring, and share worthy when it comes to the content or the brand side of things. And I'm sort of leaking into some marketing philosophy there, but back to the brand thing. So I and you can, depending on your personality, right? So you have to do things that are aligned to you, and things that make you comfortable. You don't want to be completely a fish out of water, because then the market will smell it and go, that's not authentic, that's not you. But sort of being playful and sort of in line with my character, I always intro and sign off as Sydney from Sydney. I use that in my keynotes just as a little bit of an icebreaker. So it becomes a little bit memorable, and it's a personal brand. Does it stand for anything, or is it valuable? Not really, but it certainly is an introduction. And I've walked into workshops and keynotes where the person who's invited me in and gone, Sydney from Sydney, that I haven't bothered pronouncing Minassian perfectly like you did. So good job on that, Kieran. Um, so thinking about that, or for a long time when I've spoken about looking for sales strategy and market validation, I've used the term hair on fire and checkbook out. So again, I've come up with some phrasing in my coaching or companies that I've run to make things a little bit memorable. But then I figured people are jumping on that. And so my recent newsletter that I launched on LinkedIn is called Hair on Fire, right? And so you try to come up with things that differentiate you. So that's the point of sharing the personal experience there. And then you want to make sure that your brand stands for something, not just the color and the graphics and the gimmicky Sydney from Sydney hashtag, right? People need to start seeing consistency. They need to know what it stands for, whether it's you as a person or the company. What do you do? What's your niche? Why are you important? Why now? And those things. And yes, Gen AI has completely screwed it up for everyone, because everything is starting to look the same. And I was discussing this with another founder CEO recently. Both we chatted about this online on each other's posts, and then the point of it was we were talking about from online to offline. So I think offline is going to have more importance, and have way more value for people turning up. I think we're all behind screens. We're starving for human connection, authentic connection, and when you're in the person, you're not going to turn up and say things that have got the M dash put into the middle of your statement, right? From copied from ChatGPT. So yeah, I think that's sort of it's an interesting time. I'm looking at it going, it's very noisy, and so it's getting harder and harder to get attention and take your brand out. But comes back to niche. Who you can't be famous for everybody. Start with the target audience of the people you want to be famous for or have a brand in, and then I think we're going to have to start looking at offline and things that are not quite done the same way.
Yeah, some great advice there. And I definitely agree with that point around, having something that you stand for. Like what are your values? What's your point of view? Like, I guess maybe it could be a bit contrarian, or it could be, like you said, kind of against the grain. But I do think that you need to have some kind of perspective that is, ideally different to what other people are saying in the market, right? But your point before around the humans craving this authentic and real connection, I'm definitely seeing that a lot more. And I think that there's going to be, and there already has started to be, a pretty sort of major increase in the amount of businesses that I'm seeing that are, doing small scale events or getting involved in sponsoring other events and just getting out in person, just seeing customers face to face, right? Because I think that unfortunately with AI and technology, people are just trusting or distrusting brands and people a lot more, right? Because as soon as you kind of get a sniff that, this is written by AI, it just kind of takes out that human element, right?
Yeah. I mean, especially when people read things and go, okay, I think you're making an effort, you're trying to turn up a little bit better, fine. But that doesn't sound like you, mate. Like I talk to you. So, this doesn't mean AI doesn't have a role or we don't leverage the tool. It just means finding the right balance between, using it as a editor or someone to proofread rather than completely write things that is not your voice, is not your lived experience or opinion. Everyone has the opportunity to change opinions over time, right? That's the whole point of evolving as humans and as leaders and whatever. But people smell it, and so you want to make sure it's authentic or close to where you are on your growth journey, personally, professionally, at this point in time.
Mhm. Yeah, absolutely. And so, based off your experience and working with a bunch of companies and advising founders, I mean, where do you think most founders go wrong when they're building a company?
There's a handful of things. Maybe I might bunch it up into three broad categories, two of which will actually contradict each other, but let's see how this plays out. So the first one is lack of ownership. The second one is the lack of letting go. And you'd say, well, wait a minute, doesn't that contradict itself? And the third one is the lack of deliberate self-development and self-leadership. So if I can sort of think of it as a triangle and I look at those three things, right? So the lack of ownership part, I'd say it takes courage to be a founder and start a company, and or even in leadership roles, like for you to have elevated yourself into those roles. So there's no judgment there. But sometimes, and especially first-time founders, I think this recognition that absolutely everything is your fault. And the minute you can sort of just accept that and that 100% ownership, that actually is an unlock for lots of things. And that'll really put your, it's not going to be an overwhelm. It's actually the other way around. It's actually empowering to say, everything's my fault. And I've got no control over anything anyway, but everything is my fault, right? So start with that premise. And so, which means your strategy, your process, your people, early feedback to team members for coaching. So again, like if you consider ownership, I'm responsible for this person's performance. If they're not performing, it's my fault. It's not constantly going, oh, they're not good enough or whatever. It's your job as the leader to give them early feedback, loving, but straight early feedback, coaching and hold the standard, shape the standard, demonstrate what good or great in your organization looks like, right? I think when it comes to customers, not only listening to customer feedback, but digging a little bit deeper and observing behavior, because that's one of the things that I often talk about is the false positive in early stage companies, right? Oh, we've got this kind of positive feedback, or we've got, people even bought something. But if you sort of dig deeper, where did the funding come from? Was that just funny money they could have signed off on anyway, but they've not really committed? Have they spent meaningful dollars in that category that you're now looking to bring a new solution in? Which, if they haven't, but they're giving you lip service that this is so important, whatever, you don't dismiss it. But again, you're careful in how you value that validation process. So all of that comes under the lack of ownership bit, where I said that's the first pillar. And then the not letting go, allowing people to step in and step up, allowing them to make mistakes, and that having this mindset that you are their coach, you are their leader, right? And so you want to get best out of them, and it takes time. It takes some reps. It takes saying the same thing 697 times. and also even better when you're demonstrating those standards and values. And so that's the sort of second part. And then the third part is the responsibility for you to develop yourself. So I work with these businesses that range in revenue size, right? So 2 million ARR to 50 million, 100 million ARR. And even at that level, they say, oh, we want to become a $200 million business. That's cool. What is the version of you that is running a $200 million business, right? What does your mindset look like? What are your habits? How do you show up? How do you speak to your team and your customers and your partners? And is it exactly the same as when you were a 10 million revenue business to a 50 to 100, and now you want to go to 200? So that, if we take that on as that responsibility for the self-development and the self-leadership, I think that's something that I'm again seeing that often I have to lovingly guide and course correct founders on. Like, hey, you got to develop this bit of you, like, because otherwise your team is going to call you out. If not explicitly, they're going to call you out implicitly behind your back, right? So hope that makes sense to you.
It does, yeah. And I can imagine that being a $20 million, founder of a $20 million business versus a $200 million business are two vastly different things, right? And not to say that everyone is necessarily cut out for or even potentially wants that. But like as you see companies kind of 10x, 20x, 50x their revenue, their number of customers, the number of employees they have. Like, what are the kind of the struggles? I think you might have touched on this before around some of those points you made. But like, what are some of the struggles that you do see beyond what you've mentioned there in terms of when founders do potentially try to go from 20 to 200 million?
So firstly, figuring out the balance between where am I hands-on versus where am I hands-off? What parts do I delegate? If I delegate, how do I hold to account or still have input? Because as a founder, you're so opinionated. I'm opinionated, and that's part of the deal. That's the part of the value, right? But where is it where if I'm too involved, I'm now micromanaging, and where is it that if I've just let go, I'm just setting up for a car crash when it's time for a feedback or a review, and I've sort of set the team on a trajectory and it was a bit too late, right? And so everyone's now upset. I'm upset because I didn't get the outcome. They're upset because they're like, dude, we worked on this for so long and so hard, and you could have told us earlier, right? You've agreed to let go, or we've incorporated your input along the way. So there's no perfect science to this. It's lots of trial and error, and I think each organization has their nuance and their culture and where you do this. But it's all to do with people. It's all things don't break because of technology. It's to do with are we on the same page? Are we heading in the same direction? Do we have the same shared values? How do those values show up day in, day out in the way we speak and work and celebrate, or hold each other to account for non-performance? And the way you do that when, again, you're a $10 million business to a 50 to a 200 million is different, right? And that's where if you've got a little bit of self-awareness and you get the right help and the right people around the business to guide you and help with change management at each level.
Yeah, it's a great point. Yeah, you might have touched on some of these points before, but I guess if you were like hypothetically coaching a founder right now on how to design a company that's really attractive to an investor or an asset that can be sold at a high multiple in the future, what are the key principles that you would get them to focus on early?
The obvious will be organizational hygiene, right? So your financials are clean, your cap tables are clean, you've got sales processes documented. Obviously, you've got a product or service that is of value to the market. Those things are sort of expected, right? table stakes. Where I think there's an opportunity to sort of think a little bit deeper and prepare earlier and so on. One, I'd say, is make sure you're famous for something, like that narrow focus, depending what kind of business you are. But so I'll talk about the greater average, right, rather than the outliers. But most businesses are not going to be known for everything to all people, right? You're not going to. There's not many businesses that are going to have Atlassian's trajectory where they start in issue tracking to now they've got the whole suite of products, right? So we're talking about those businesses that potentially don't go on that path of massive billion-dollar growth and have an exit at some point. So you want to make sure that you're narrow and niche. So often people have heard me say narrow niche ninja, right? Be narrow and niche and be known for something. So with Contexty, for example, in 2012, I could see the whole big data AI market emerging. At the time, big data was the big term we were throwing around. Now it's AI. But so I could see the market sort of coming, and the previous work that I'd done with my venture in the US that didn't work out. But again, it was around, using natural language processing and extracting insights from other sources of data. So I could see that, yeah, this is coming. And back then I could have wanted to set up a business that did cloud and mobility and security and just had a general services business. But I really positioned for, no, we're the big data experts in the Asia Pacific market. And I just branded that like from get-go, for example, right? So really niche. Or when I stepped into Sassian as CEO, Sassian has got a handful of products and they're all good, but I really quietened all of them down and really focused on the AI-powered student safety to protect kids from cyberbullying, self-harm, suicide, violence, grooming, image-based abuse, and built a brand story and message and brand identity and did a complete change of that all around that one niche, right? So by doing that, and one of the points I'm going to talk about is to be found, right? Position yourself to be found. You don't want to set up for a sale of either your product or the business. You want to enable a purchase. You want to enable an acquisition, and therefore you want prospective employees coming to you. So having that sort of mindset in the architecture of your business and the way you go about it already is your North Star on a few things, including a potential exit. So narrow focus, yes. We already spoke about creating some type of contrast so that they go, okay, what are you famous for and why are you special? So back in 2012, if people do a bit of research, data science is the sexiest job in the market. They were promoting that, right? Data scientist this, data scientist that. Everyone should learn data science, whatever. And I looked at the market and went, data science is so hard to do. And the promise of delivering an insight as a services provider is so hard because you've got to have clean data, you've got to have all the pipes that bring it. And then I don't have your business context. Like I can't do a context switch from banking to mining to pharmaceutical and be an expert in all of it, right? So the way I separated us from all the data science noise was like, oh, no. We do the data platform piping and managed services of those platforms and pipes. And in fact, I argued that data science is something you should do in-house and not outsource. That's your unique secret sauce. Like that's something you should invest on internally. Whereas how the cloud infrastructure works and how data comes in and out, whatever, that is table stakes. Like that, there's nothing special in that. Give that to us. So that became a strong differentiator when I walked in. I wasn't sounding like all the other services firms who would say, oh, we do analytics and data science. And if you've got, an ERP system, we can do analytics on that. And we can do some platform services. I'd go, no, we're just platform specialists. That's it, right? So that helped us. The other few things I'd suggest is sort of an extension of brand, but it's a completely different, again, concept to activate and, provoke your mind, which is own the category. And don't be scared to own the category, even as the young upstart entrant, right? So to give you some examples with Contexty, it was early days. Like people didn't know, well, what are they going to do with this big data? What is it? Is it real? Is it hype? What are we doing? And so both to engage a meaningful conversation and to give something of value to prospects, but also to establish ourselves as the owning the category, I came up with the big data maturity model and self-assessment guide from Contexty. We didn't wait for McKinsey to release it. We didn't wait for Deloitte to do it. We went, no, we're the experts. Now, I had a credible team that I pulled in from ex-KPMG, senior people from NAB. So we did have the right team, and some of that, framework thinking, systems thinking is my background. So while I'm not a coder and I've never coded, I've always had to think about strategy and process and framing, both for internal and organizational needs, as well as for the human behavioral things where I coach on, right? So that was sort of my home ground advantage. So I'm like, right, we're going to put that out and own the category. And then we sort of took it up a few notches and we came up with the Big Data Center of Excellence in Sydney. And so that was an interesting play where I had physical space, 300 square meters. There was only 5 people in the company at the time, but we'd taken out 300 square meters. And we got Cisco and Telstra to fund it. So they sponsored it through, and being ex-HubSpot, the concept of MDF. Well, I really pushed the envelope on MDF. This was a multi-$100,000 investment that they made. And that sort of comes to the partnership thing I mentioned earlier. We can come back to that. But the point there was owning the category. We held all the data science and developer meetups on Tuesday nights with pizza and beer. And on Friday morning, we held talks for executive level people with coffee and croissants. And never a Contexty pitch, but always hosted at the Contexty Big Data Center of Excellence, sponsored by Cisco and Telstra, and their logos were up on the wall. And so again, that sort of put our brand in the market, right? So you can imagine when it comes to time for an exit, or the acquirers, constantly they're hearing thought leadership, events taking place at Contexty, and then I actually followed through and did something similar to what you're doing now. I launched a podcast series called Show Innovation. So at the time, Malcolm Turnbull was our Prime Minister, and he was talking about the Innovation Nation, and I got Victor Dominello to come on my show, and the CEO of Cure Brain Cancer Foundation at the time, Catherine Stace, lovely, smart woman, and 30 other guests, right? So again, I created, and again, never a pitch, but always a brand and an authority that we owned the category. So own the category. In line with that, you can see what I'm sort of going, which is then build a media engine. I keep arguing every company should be a media business, right? You have to own your media and have a media engine. I already spoke about be found. And finally, create tension. Make sure you've created tension in the deal, which means you've got multiple people interested in your company and you've nurtured the relationship for a while, right? And so anyway, I'm throwing a lot at you, but these are the elements and pillars that I have executed on somewhat well. And definitely since advising others, I get to be a little bit more detached and think about it and observe it and coach on them much better these days.
So much gold in there. And we could take this in a number of different directions. But one thing that I really was drawn to, Sidney, when I did some research before our conversation today, was you talk a lot about this concept of optionality, right? Which I think is a really fascinating topic. How does that concept show up in how you advise companies today? And how do you think the founders should think about it early into their journey?
Well, optionality is so broad, right? I think there's a few things that I sort of focus on, which is one, always be exit ready, because that gives you optionality in multiple ways. So if, again, you got clean financials, well-documented process, thoughtful delegation and culture, you can do a lot of things. And exit, by the way, and I've done this with some other founders, exit doesn't always mean getting a immediate financial exit. Sometimes it means you being able to step away from the business and have the business run and pay you both a salary and a director fee or a dividend, right? Because it's doing so well and you're not quite ready to flip it to another organization. But because you're exit ready, because you've taken this systems thinking approach to the business and you've invested in culture and leadership and have learned the points of delegation and when to let go and whatever, that gives you optionality to either bring in a CEO, let them run it, promote someone internally, let them run it, or in fact, go raise money to scale it more or sell to someone who's going to ultimately own this, right? So that concept of being exit ready is an important aspect of the optionality. The other part of optionality, and sort of to help with exit readiness, but also to open up different opportunities like I found with this big data center of excellence and pulling hundreds of thousands from Cisco and Telstra, is talk to your partners. And again, you've been partner manager, right? And I keep looking at the other side of what you were managing, right? Being a partner organization. I was like, I don't think these end resellers recognize that they could get so much more from the HubSpots of the world, or in my case, it was Telstra, Cisco, Cloudera, Mappa, Hortonworks. So I've sort of closed in on all the big data players on cloud and on some of the data center technologies. That's why Cisco and Telstra were interested. But if you figure out what they need and what makes them win, and then you're able to architect some clever ideas, because you as the founder are going to have lots of ideas, but not enough money and not enough distribution. Whereas they've got lots of money, lots of distribution, but are used to institutional thinking, right? They won't have as fresh ideas. They still come up with some magical stuff. These are all great organizations, and that's why they're multi-billion-dollar businesses. So I'm not criticizing that. I'm just saying at this point in time, you're going to have more creativity, less distribution, less money. They're going to have more money and more distribution, at least at your intersection point where you guys talk to each other. So use that to your advantage, right? Go in with ideas, but understand what they need. Don't make it all about you, and be prepared to do the homework for them. Like if they have to take up a business case, write the business case. If an ROI has to be calculated, you figure it out. Do the first draft, do the second draft. And especially today, I didn't have this ChatGPT back in 2015 when I did those deals, right? Whereas now, like lots of those things you could easily draft up and get ready to help your partner also win in what you're looking to do. So talk to partners, but also talk to your competitors, talk to your prospective investors, right? And that was part of the ease and flow of how I did eventually sell Contexty, in that I'd spoken to the people that were my natural acquirers all along and had dinners with the CEOs, shared, you don't share everything, but you share enough and you start getting a sense of who they are and the kind of organizations they run. Because that's not for everyone, but for me, that was an important aspect. Where does my team land? And where do my customers, who is going to look after the customers that I have nurtured and brought on the journey with me? So that was important to me on where that ended up, even though personally I was like, I'm tired. I don't want to keep going. So that was part of my negotiation with Versant, that I'm going to do a clean handover, but don't try to give me any more responsibility. I need a break. And they, Tor agreed to that. But it was important where it's landed. So by doing the work early, connecting with your prospective, connecting with your competitors who are your prospective acquirers is a valuable thing to do. And finally, you may have read or seen videos of me talk about this, is your job is to drink coffee and have big thoughts, right? As the founder, which is again, that concept of take ownership of everything, think about strategy. So drink coffee is spending time with people, right? So whether it's employees, coaching them, whether it's the market, whether it's prospective investors or acquirers, and have big thoughts is spend time on thinking strategy, coming up with new ideas, both for internal things that you might share with partners and so on. So yeah, they're the handful of things that I recommend founders to think about as they do it early and make it part of their DNA, and they've got muscle memory to position for a natural acquisition option if they choose to.
Love it. Again, just so many nuggets of gold in there. One thing that I'm really interested, Sydney, is you seem to have, developed like you were saying before, like this kind of systems thinking and this mindset of being able to look at the big picture and kind of break it down into different operating systems or different operating parts. How has your mindset evolved over time from the operator, kind of building and running and,
Yeah.
leading these companies to an advisor? And I guess, what do you do now that you wish you had done earlier in your journey?
Yeah. So I've always had elements of this that I think I've refined over time, but the things that I do now that are sort of, not sort of, absolutely non-negotiables that I wasn't doing when I was running these businesses, and maybe that was a sign of my age at the time or whatever. I'm turning 50 in a couple of weeks. Self-care is the thing that I didn't do as thoughtfully and as intentionally as what I do now. So real focus on exercise and healthy eating and making sure that I align to my natural energies of where I'm high energy, high intensity, and doing creative work in those things, and then breaking up and doing other things in other times where I need less thinking. So my days are quite structured now. So every morning I'm at the gym. My mornings are dedicated to then ideation, my own content creation, whether it's videos, newsletters, or other things that I'm currently writing, which haven't been unveiled yet. And then in the afternoons is mostly when I do my coaching delivery, because sort of I've had my exercise, physical, back and forth. I've had my mental agitation back and forth, and I've locked away some key things that I'm trying to do, including some business development for myself, right? So discipline of doing those things. So content and strategy, business development, that's my morning. And then afternoons, I'm ready for my clients. I've, had my lunch, whatever. An afternoon is all commitment to delivery, and then I stack it that way, and therefore I'm in the zone. I'm not thinking, oh, I should have written that article, or I need to be it's very clean. It's locked away. I've already, feel good that I've started the day well with exercise and good food and whatever. So self-care is an important aspect that I didn't do as much, and I absolutely do now. Being in an advisor role has allowed me to do this much more, but going back again, if we can learn detachment, that's such a powerful thing. And I haven't obviously mastered it yet, but absolutely working on it. And it obviously makes it easier when I'm a arm's length advisor coach that has got your back, but it's not my house on the line anymore. It's not, the employees don't call me every other day with a problem, or, if customers don't pay, it's not my bank account that is suffering, right? So I appreciate that. So it's easier to be detached, but as I'm doing my own different ventures, or as I think about my relationships or other things, learning detachment is an important skill and important thing to practice, because often when we don't have that detachment, we lose sight of reality around validation. So, is this opportunity real? Am I too close to this thing? Am I wanting it to happen so badly that it smells off, both for prospective acquirers or employees or prospective customers, that I'm pushing too hard, right? So if you've got detachment built in, you're very methodical. I'm doing something great for the world. I'm doing it with my best of my abilities and the people that I can pull around me right now. And the market will dictate, and trust it. Trust that you, in your natural best flow state, and the market in what it needs right now will dictate. And if you have to pivot, you pivot, right? But if we're too close to it, it's a bit harder. So detachment is important. And then you spoke about sort of the systems thinking and methodical. I say it way more eloquently than what I would have executed in the past, right? So more and more I realize, yes, there were so many feats of heroic sales, heroic development where I look back, I go, it, it was touch and go. Like if, I or one of the other people weren't in the loop, that business was not solid. It would have been shaky, right? So that's something you want to sort of improve on, that you've got really systems thinking and processes into the business so that you can have optionality in step aways. It's all connected, right? The things that we're talking about. And finally, I've done this in the past, but I do it way more deliberately now, where I talk about that pull strategy. So your whole mission is to enable a sale, is to enable an acquisition, not push a sale or push a sale onto a customer or push an exit onto someone else. You want that law of attraction thing. So that actually lifts your standards, like how you show up, what you deliver, where, back to the media engine thing, back to the brand thing, back to the, it's all connected, where you're bringing people in, they go, geez, we want to be part of that story. So if you can achieve that, then that makes life way easier for your team, and makes it more joyful, which is what we should be trying to do in whatever we do, business, life, whatever.
Absolutely. Yeah, you gotta love what you do, right? I mean, considering how much time it occupies, not just in your day to day, but what's going on in your head. That's one of the things that I think founders have to deal with, right? Is just that always on, just that stream of thought that's constantly coming to them. It could be at, 11 o'clock in the morning, or 11 o'clock at night. Like, it's just always there, right? So, got to make
Yes,
sure you enjoy what you do, and I guess have that sort of that mission or a purpose and something that you're working towards. I think is really helpful.
indeed. Yes.
To round things out, Sydney, like reflecting back and sort of where you've come from to where you're at now, if you were starting again from scratch tomorrow, what would you build, and how would your playbook look different in 2025 compared to 2015?
Right. Gee, it's so much has happened just in the last 6 months, let alone the last 10 years, right? So the 2015 to 2025 is such a big contrast. Back to systems thinking and sort of first principles, I'd say look for a few things. And this is me saying to me, because you said, what would I do? uh, One is look for where you've got home ground advantage on things, right? So you've got a deep market insight. You happen to have operated in a space that, you have battle scars, you've got failures, you've got, things that you would have done the hard way, the manual way, whatever, right? So I think home ground advantage is always helpful to get a venture up and running. And then given what you can achieve with AI today, and I use a lot, right? So both not only on the content side of things to do reviews and image creation and automation and things like that, but playing a lot with Lovable, lots of different ideas, and quickly iterating on, well, here's a concept. And before you would have to like do a survey to go and do market validation, now you can build an entire app and say, this is for this industry, it solves this specific problem. And the way I'm saying there is look for micro problems, or think that you're creating a micro business. Because everyone's saying, thinking big, but it's that part of the market has moved so fast and so far that unless you've got, again, some homegrown advantage where you've got some, PhD level capability where Facebook's going to throw 100 million sign-on bonus to you, which is what they're doing at the moment with those engineers, AI engineers. Unless you're one of those, if you're at this end of the spectrum where I am, where I'm a good generalist, but I'm ambitious still. I keep telling my 3 kids, "Hey, I've just come to the starting line. Watch this. I'm just getting started." Right. The guidance for me is look for home ground advantage. Look for some micro businesses where there's problems, and these micro businesses might not grow more than $1 million a year in recurring revenue, but it might require only one employee and a whole bunch of AI and agents to run it. Haven't quite nailed what that is yet. I'm doing a bunch of experimentation and validation, but that's sort of the way I'm thinking and shaping that. And of course, there is the whole concept of make sure there's a problem there, that hair on fire checkbook out. Someone today in the industry or in the space that you're trying to solve a problem is already self-realized in what you're doing. So hair on fire, meaning I don't have to educate you that there's a problem. Your hair's burning. You're screaming, saying, "Sid, my hair's burning," and you've got money to pay anyone who can help put it out, right? So looking for those behaviors. So when I talk about don't just go off what people are saying, but follow the money trail. Have they spent money to solve that problem? Again, is a guiding light for what business to do. And yeah, in 2015, like if I wanted to do something technical, whatever, or even I paid for logo designers, I paid for website developers. None of that's needed now. Now you've got ready to go AI, agentic, generative AI products that can absolutely fast track you. So that's massive change. And it's scary to see how quickly it's all changing and moving every day, multiple new offerings. So, yeah.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, it's super exciting to see what one person can do now, right? That leverage that you get through all these different tools and all these different applications with AI. So, I mean, we're just at the start of it, right? Like the tip of the iceberg, and there's so much further to go. So, yeah, excited to see what happens in the next 10 years, right? Even thinking about, like you said, 6 months, it's going to be a pretty wild world in 2035, that's for sure.
For sure.
Sidney, thank you so much for joining us. If people wanted to, say, follow along on your journey or connect with you in the future, where's the best place for them to do that?
You can find me on LinkedIn. I'm Sidney Minassian. I'm on Instagram. Some oldies like me still might be on Facebook. I'm there. And if you like, you can follow my impactladder.com website. I've got some tools and resources for founders and leaders that might help them with go-to-market, growing the business. And you would have heard from this conversation, I'm also very passionate about helping people grow themselves. So I speak and coach on a lot of those things as well. So yeah, I'm on all socials. So look out for Sidney from Sydney.
Unreal. Sidney, thanks a lot. Really appreciate the conversation. It's been fantastic.
Thank you, mate.
Cheers.
Thanks for listening to this episode of Growth Unlocked Beyond Scale. If you enjoyed the show, it would really be appreciated if you can leave a 5-star review wherever you consume your podcasts. And while you're there, why not subscribe to the channel so you don't miss any future episodes? If you'd like to learn about how to drive profitable scale in your business, gain clarity on your direction, and improve your business valuation, click the link in the show notes to connect with Kieran.